Okay, so we've talked about posing the character, but now we get into a section that is a little more difficult to kind of wrap your head around, and that's splining. So if we have our character initially set, sorry, let me turn off joints and IK handles. So we have our character initially set up animating in stepped mode, right? What splining means is literally we are going to start messing with all of these spline curves. And that's what these are called. They're usually called a spline curve. A lot of people do it in different ways. I'm actually really happy with what I have right now when I have it in stepped mode. The timing looks good. I have two cameras so I can see what the final camera will look like. I'm happy with what the timing looks like. Usually when we go to splining, grab everything, set it to auto tangents, and what we see then looks significantly less good. So what we have to do is we have to figure out how to get sort of the poppiness and some of the extra overlapping and stuff. So some of that involves setting extra keyframes. Other parts of that involve going through here and working with the curves, and some of it is a little bit of both. So let's see what we have here, just a little bit at a time, and sort of see why it's not working. So the character anticipates, but it doesn't really hold it very much. It dips down, sort of shoots across, but it's already starting to sort of push back upwards there. Hits that really hard, but then immediately changes directions. Starts drifting back down in a very linear way. So I see that a lot of my issues is I need a couple of extra poses in here. Like I think I may need an overshoot for this piece where it hits this pose but then still kind of goes somewhere else. And I definitely need another pose for the anticipation because it's like it drifts to the anticipation and then does that. So what I think I'm going to do, I'm going to grab all my keys. And so let's work on this anticipation pose first. So my anticipation happens really slowly over the period of 14 keyframes. And so we may have to do a little bit of timing changes here. So I think that that's actually what I need to do is I actually just want to get my character to this anticipation a little earlier. And I may even go ahead and shift this keyframe here to be a little later. So instead of on frame 14, now it's on frame 17. But I'm just going to go in here to maybe say frame 14, maybe 13. And I'm just going to hit S to set a keyframe on that. And then I'm going to shift that keyframe earlier. Now, another way I could have done that is just went there to frame 13 and then middle mouse clicked and dragged back to here and then hit S. But what we're going to see now is it hits almost that pose relatively early, right? So the character gets to that pose kind of quickly, and so we're kind of borrowing a portion of that. Now it gets to it, but it doesn't completely stop. It doesn't lock, right? We're getting most of the way there, and then the character is kind of settling into it, and then moving here. And so I'm doing that because not because that's the pose I need, because that's just a better starting point for me. So if we want the character to kind of shift over to there and then continue it anticipating over, maybe I would actually go in here and put just a little bit more push on that. Okay, I would also probably have this pose be a little lower, and I would actually keep my foot on the ground here. So I grab the foot and I'm just copying frame 1 to frame 7. So we see that the anticipation's happening now a little earlier. And so, I can always do a little bit of some different stuff. Maybe I roll back like he's pushing off on his heel or something like that. And so now my key pose is that. And then again here, I maybe would put another keyframe on my entirely up pose here. Because you see what happens is he hits that pose and then slowly starts to drift back down. Well, what I think I actually want is the opposite. I want it to sort of ease into that pose a little bit. So I'm actually going to duplicate this pose on frame 33. Move it back to here. Okay. And so what's going to happen is he's going to hit that pose and just kind of hold it, but we're not going to keep all of that because you see how it just kind of locks in place. The character goes up frame 35 locks in place and then settles back down. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to edit some different things on these curves to make that soften a little bit. So my translate Y obviously is going to be pretty harsh there, and so I'm just going to ease into that a little bit. All right. So it doesn't hit it completely all the way, and then he sort of steps into it. Translate X is the same. Okay. Translate Z, probably similar, not as intense. And so I'm just kind of looking at that just to kind of show you that there's two different ways of kind of getting the same thing. I can manually, manipulate the pose to change a little bit. And so maybe that's actually still what I would do. Maybe I would still have this pose a little bit more like this. So the character kind of hits this up. So I'm just going through and changing little bits at a time just to see. And then overshoots it and comes back that way. But still the foot is locking in place, so I still need something else to happen with this foot. So maybe he does a little bit like that. Let's see how that feels. I think maybe I should start coming back down toward the ground. So maybe I'll actually just borrow whoever's on frame 40 here. Okay, so now we get, when I watch this, the timing feels a little closer now, right? Now the thing that is also missing is some of the arcs of the hip. The arc of the hip is not something I'm happy with. So what I would do is I would go in here and with animation turned on, I would say create editable motion trail. And so now I can look at my motion trail in here and adjust that arc to be something I'm happier with. So you see the character goes kind of a little too low there, and then he kind of goes up a little bit and then sort of flattens out and then up a little bit more. So I think one of the things I would do is I would make this one lower and maybe make this one a bit higher. I have to pull that foot back a little bit. Okay, so now I'm getting a little bit of a nicer arc on that step. Okay. And so if we watch it now, so all in all, a lot of people maybe would call this almost finished. Those people are not called animators. So what we're going to do now, I'm just tightening up my timeline so we can see it a little bit better. So what I'm going to do now is a little bit more detailed splining. Now what is wrong with this? If I select every keyframe on here, you'll see that every keyframe is still hitting at the same time. So for example, the upmost pose here is hitting at the same time as the foot. So you see that the foot goes up right there and sort of hits at the same time. And so all of the key poses, all of the parts are hitting and starting and stopping all at the same keyframes. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to do a little bit of polishing on the curves to make them do what I want them to do, but I'm also going to offset some of this stuff. So for example, maybe I want this foot to start moving forward a little earlier. Right now it starts moving forward on frame 17, gets there on frame 23, but that's the same time that the body starts moving forward. You'll see that? So what I can do is I can actually grab this foot's keyframe and move that forward a frame. Maybe move this forward a frame. And so what we get is this feeling that the foot starts that motion and gets there first. Okay. Now I'd probably still go in here a little bit and change the way my foot arcs into that. I don't want it to ever really pop like we're getting there. So maybe I'll delete that one. And I don't want it to be locked out there. Maybe I didn't need that one. Let's see. Still think I needed something there to kind of guide the foot through its arc. So maybe that's what I wanted the foot. So the foot feels like it's going just a little bit earlier than the rest of the body. At the same time, maybe this part here, it's starting to rotate at the same time that the base here is starting to move, right? Maybe I want that to happen a frame later. Maybe just across the board I want everything on this object to happen a frame later. I can grab that and offset it. And so similar to the pendulum, now the rotation of that is going to drag the head by a frame, right? So you'll see that that's happening, hitting there. So that's the first thing we can do is we can do some slight offsetting with stuff. So we'll see how this character's foot starts rotating up right as the character starts moving. Maybe I would actually just hold that for a little bit longer and make that happen at a slightly different time. Now this seems like nitpicky stuff. This seems like it's not that important. And on the surface, it's like, the changes that we're making are very small. But it's these changes that actually start loosening up the character and making it feel more real and more believable. Okay, so the last thing, this isn't the last thing, but the part of this is called splining for a reason. Because I'm doing a lot of this as keyframes, but almost all of this, the largest part of the time that you're going to be spending doing this, you're going to be in the curves. Okay, here is the part that people don't believe, but I cannot emphasize this enough. The way you do your splining is you go through and you start with the hips, and then you start with translate X, you frame this up, and you go through this curve and you scrub through it thinking nothing about your translate X. Now you'll see that translate X is your side to side movement. Okay, so what we have is the character starts to move over to that side, and then it kind of flattens out there, right? And then it starts transitioning forward. It hits that point and then continues going over and then starts coming back, right? And so that's all this curve is sort of showing us, okay? But what it's showing us is sort of the simplest version of that motion. And so this is what separates professional animators from people who try it a few times and decide they're not good enough at it. This has to be edited, like, a lot. So for example, I look at this and I say it kind of flattens out there too much. Maybe I want this to go a little bit further forward. Maybe I'll have this happen a little later, and maybe I'll change the tangent a little bit just so it faster and doesn't plateau out quite as much, right? I may also even adjust this tangent to get it like that. I'm relatively happy with how it starts to take off, but maybe I want it to hold back just a little bit more, and then it sort of darts forward. Now right here, I think I want it to be a little further forward earlier. Maybe something like this. Now I know I'm messing up my foot, but we can come back and look at that later. Okay, so that's going to happen a little faster right through there now, right? And then when we get here, I think it plateaus, or it slows down too quickly. So what I'm actually going to do is something like this, okay? And then I'm going to go in here and add another keyframe right there. Move that down a little bit. I have to work on my tangents for that. Okay, so what I'm actually getting now is a little bit of some overshoot in the character. So I got that, and the character comes back and kind of does this overshoot and recoil. The key I actually like to do is the add key tool, not the insert key tool. And so I'm just going to add another one here and sort of position that there so it doesn't quite take so long to sort of drift back. Okay, now these are all decisions I would make. I mean, I may not even be done yet. I would maybe also add a key here and just kind of get that sort of flowing the way I want it to, right? So all of those small tweaks there that I just made are only on the way the character moves from side to side, right? Which in this case is actually a pretty important aspect of it, right? You have to do that, and this is no joke. You have to do that for every channel that exists on every control for this character. That's why this animation, if I were getting paid to do it, would take me probably, I would say at least 7 to 8 hours. Doing a run cycle, doing a walk cycle, in for a character, I could do one of those maybe in about 8 hours. This is an equivalent amount of work. So literally, I've done that on Translate X. Now I got to Translate Y. I'll go through all of these for every control on the character. If you spend any less than 5 hours in splining, you're wasting your time. Like you're not going to ever be able to get a reasonable job being able to do it that way. So we're now going to look at the translate Y, which is our up and down motion, right? And so we'll look at that again. The character kind of dips a little bit and then comes back up. Maybe, and then the character starts dipping again right there. Dips kind of deep, pops up, but it kind of feels like it hits that corner and changes directions, and then comes back down and then just flattens, right? So we can see a couple areas we could improve. But the first thing I would probably do is considering adding a few more keyframes. I would add a keyframe maybe to have it get to that point a little early. That way it kind of hangs there just a little bit before it starts changing directions. On my dip, I kind of want to also have it dip down a little bit more. And I definitely want it to overshoot here. I want it to hit that top point, kind of go over just a little bit, and then come back down. After it does that, that's the up point. The character comes back down, and then it just goes flat. And so that was a problem with how I keyframed it. I would really probably do something more like that, and then add key tool. I would just go ahead and pop another one here to kind of bring it back. I maybe even would do something like that. I'm not 100% sure. I would have to try that out. Something else that maybe we consider doing is holding it up just a touch more so that drop happens a little, like it's like we're delaying the drop just a little bit longer. Okay, and so now if I watch that, keep in mind we're just thinking of the up and down. Okay, that's not bad. Right. And then again, I'm going to go to Translate Z. Now, Translate Z is the forward and back. And so that's why I have two cameras here, so I can go to this camera and look at it. I probably don't need to worry as much about it, but I will, spend a little bit of time on it. Now, after that, that's when I'm going to go to my rotates. Okay, so now my rotate X, as you can see, is my forward and back rotate. Okay, and so you can start seeing problem areas pretty quickly. What I'm doing to scale this in multiple angles, by the way, if you hold Alt and then right click, you can zoom in and out, but if you hold Shift Alt right click, you can zoom in and out in one axis or the other. And so I can kind of do a little bit of tweaking on this, just because those are warning signs. When it flattens out anywhere, that's usually a warning sign. So basically this is my forward and backward motion. Let's look a little bit more at the rotate Z, which is your side to side, right? And so we see a couple of problem areas there where that sort of flattens and that sort of flattens. So I'm just going to automatically ease those. But let's think about that. So the character rotates there. I kind of want it to continue rotating just a little bit more, right? Maybe a little bit more like that. Maybe I would even drag that to something like this. I don't know yet. And then the character rotates really deep and then automatically starts rotating back forward again. So let's play with that a little bit and add another key like that, right? So the character is going to move on through. It's going to still stay a little bit rotated. Maybe I'll drag it a little bit more like that. And so we hit here. I want to overshoot that rotation. And so I want to add a key to that. And then as the character comes back down, maybe I would want to keep it rotated that way a little bit longer. Maybe a little bit of something like that. So let's see. And then I want to have it goes past it and then comes back to being sort of straight up and down. I can actually make some tweaks to the poses here. Because probably what I'm going to do is I'm going to have it go a little bit further past it and then come back a little earlier. So something like that. I'm actually hitting middle click to add these keys, by the way. So that maybe would be what I would have on that side-to-side rotation. And just from that little bit of motion, I have a lot more control of it. Now, I'm not joking. If you're interested in doing animation as a career and you don't do this, it's just not going to happen. Like, you have to go through here and adjust every tangent. on every control to get the motion that you need to get. And if you are fighting doing that, then you're probably just not going to end up with as good of motion. So like let's look at our rotate Z on this thing. It sort of drags back and flattens out. So maybe I would even push that a little bit more. And then the character, like I want that to go already be starting to flip forward. So maybe what I would do is I would do something like that. Move that even earlier, right? And so we get to right about there. That's rotating all the way to, keep in mind what we're rotating is our side to side motion. So that's going to be that, right? So the character's head sort of flips over to the side, and then that's a problem area because it's starting to go the other way. So I'm actually going to drag it a little bit more that way. Okay, and then we want this to kind of hit and go way past it. So maybe even something like, I want something probably even like that. And then come back. So it's fine for this to be sort of dragging a little bit, but then we want to come back and overshoot here too. Okay. So that's sort of some of the base changes I would do. I'd probably still go in here and do a little bit more tweaking. Add key tool, maybe overshoot there a little bit. I would do that and that. And so what I'm actually going to get is those things are going to happen a little bit quicker now. So you see how I'm kind of getting this overlapping action in the upper head, right? And so I'll do that with all that. I'll add in the blinks, do changes to the blinks. I'll do it on the squash and stretch. If you look at my squash and stretch controls, these are a little bit like soft. I don't get quite as much stretching right there, but maybe I would actually want to squish a little bit right there. Maybe. And then pop up. Go a little bit past that. And then I think I want to get back down here to this squish a little bit earlier. So something like that. Add key tool. So, like, I don't know, I'm just kind of tinkering with it now, but this is going to be able to give you, so you're seeing that my squash and stretch is happening a little bit better. Now that's maybe a little too much at times, but, and so that's just those three controls. I still got to do the feet. If you've done anything to the eyebrows, I got to do the aims. And the feet have a pretty decent amount of controls on it, because we also got the toe roll and all that stuff. You literally have to look at every channel on every control, literally. I'm not being facetious. I'm not making this up. Like, you literally have to look at every one of the controls. So that's what spining is, and that's what polish is. So if you have any questions, please let me know, and I'll talk to you soon. Thanks.